All right. Finally, since you were sick and tired of Ruth, we're starting the book of Proverbs. um, hmm. Yeah, so I pulled off finding 3 lectures on the book of Proverbs. Not easy to find content. I mean, it's so scattered, right? It's like, how do you find the guiding thread of this text? So I think we're good. Um, Before I start talking about the book of Proverbs, I'll tell you a little bit about Solomon, because we're going to be with him for the next almost month, because we do Ecclesiastes after that, and then Song of Songs. So he's really, so it's good to know him and to know also a little bit how he thinks, because we're going to see that over and over again in these 3 different books that we're about to do by him. Okay, so of course we don't know who wrote these books for sure, right? But tradition maintains it was King Solomon, and also there's some textual indication that it could be him. And very simply the following: all 3 books have a strong connection to Egyptian language and worldview. So these are not texts. A lot of people say these texts, especially Book of Ecclesiastes, is written around the time of the Greeks, because there's some similar philosophical worldview, the circular time, right? Circular temporality, the kind of cynicism you have in the Book of Ecclesiastes makes people think it's like a based on, connected to Stoicism or Epicureanism in Greek thought. But actually, if you go into the actual language of the books, you will find much more connection to Egyptian language and worldview. So for that reason, right, I will go along with the traditional view that these texts were authored by King Solomon, and that they, because of the strong Egyptian connection, which of course Solomon had. Why? What was his main connection to Egypt? Anybody know? Yes.
In Egyptian wife.
Exactly. His first wife, the beloved, was Egyptian, right? He built a palace for her. I mean, there was, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. So that's, so I'm gonna go with King Solomon. So let me tell you a little bit about him. So he's a very interesting guy. His name is Solomon, Shlomo, which means peace, right? And he is indeed the king of peace. He was the first and only king, actually, who had peace with the neighbors, with the neighboring nations. He made alliances with them, married their daughters, right? He had, as a result, almost 100 wives, 1,000 concubines. He was definitely a ladies' man. But most of these, of course, were political alliances, right? Which I'm sure he enjoyed. But so he was really, there was trade going on, there was an exchange of goods, but also of ideas, obviously, right? King Solomon was someone who not only we see that in his writings, he was not only, trading with these countries, he was learning, studying at their schools. We have, when you read the works of Solomon, you have, and I'll point them out as we go along, you have a lot of allusions to the cultic literature of the, for example, goddess Inanna, right, that we studied, so we know her. So there, especially the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs is so many connections with the Sumerian goddess literature, right? And what we're going to learn here with Proverbs and Ecclesiastes is the Egyptian connection to the goddess Ma'at, which I don't even know how to pronounce it. Can anyone look it up on their phone, like how to pronounce this goddess's name, so I don't mess up the rest of the video with the wrong pronunciation? So Ma'at, M-A-A-T, right? So he's also going to have be well versed in the literature surrounding her her divinity, or her status, or her her presence as a goddess in Egypt. So so we can see that. And by the way, people also came to learn from Solomon. Do you know the story about that? Of someone who traveled very far to learn from Solomon. He had that kind of reputation that people would go from very far away. You don't remember this story?
You're pronouncing it right, Bonnie.
Ma'at? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nobody remembers the Queen of Sheba who visited King Solomon from East Africa, all the way from, she heard about him all the way from there. She's the queen, we believe she's the queen of the present day Ethiopians, right? She was the queen there. She was herself a wise woman, right? And she heard about Solomon. She was like, let's see if he's as good as people say. She traveled there with a whole retinue of, gifts and camels and a whole caravan. And We know that the biblical text actually talks about they interacted. She tested him. He passed, and then she went home. And it is believed she went home with more than wisdom, right? She went home with perhaps an heir, right, from King Solomon. And the tradition, maintains that the Falashas, the Ethiopian Jews that exist today in Ethiopia, are descendants of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. So quite a ladies' man, seduced her with his wisdom and and created a whole new nation. So you see, there were a lot of, we have to remember, there were a lot of exchanges, intellectual exchanges, economic exchanges at the time. It was almost like today, right? New York is a crossroads for all kinds of nations. Jerusalem was that at the time. And people would come to Jerusalem to study wisdom, and Solomon himself would travel to the neighboring countries and was familiar with their cultic texts, with the literature surrounding the goddesses. So that's a little bit the biography of King Solomon. You get an idea. So he was himself very much, I think, he's one of the most connected to the feminine of all the biblical writers is really King Solomon. For one thing, he had a very powerful mother. Anybody remember who is his mother? Go ahead, Epstein.
Bathsheba.
Bathsheba. Now, Bathsheba, why do I say she was powerful? I mean, we know the story. Initially, she wasn't that powerful. Initially, of course, the story is that she was the wife of one of King David's, right? The father of Solomon, one of King David's closest bodyguards, his wife. So imagine the depth of the betrayal, right? And David falls in love with this woman, sends his bodyguard to the front, gets him killed, and takes the woman, right? Now she's already an interesting character even then, right? She tells him, he tells her to come to him, and so he can sleep with her, and she says, oh, I am in my, monthly impurity, I can't come right away. So she's already quite intelligent, right? She's trying to kind of maybe save some time, put some distance, give him time to think this over. But eventually, of course, it doesn't work. She ends up his wife and gives birth to King Solomon. Now, why do I say she's powerful? What did she enable? What's the main political action that she did during her reign? Yeah.
She enabled Solomon to inherit the throne.
She put him on the throne, right? She went to King David and said, you promised me, it's time. He needs, because some of the other sons were plotting to become king. She heard about it. She went up to him and said, put him on the throne now. So it happens, right? So very powerful woman. So he has a powerful mother. He has powerful wives, right? We know that from the biblical text, which is not too happy about it. Biblical text is a bit critical, says, yeah, he listened to his wives and started to worship other gods, goddesses, right? That's what he was worshiping, by the way, not gods, goddesses, right? The women at the time were worshiping goddesses like Asherah, who is the Canaanite rendition of Inanna. Let me give you that. Let's write all these goddesses down. So Inanna is the one we studied from Sumer. When the Babylonians invade, when the Babylonians invade, or when the Semites invade Sumer, she becomes the Babylonian goddess of Ishtar, which we'll meet when we study Esther. Now Babylon. So Babylon is the same geographical region as Sumer, but now it's conquered by the Semites, and so it's called Babylon. And then she becomes a number of Canaanite deities, and we have the very famous Asherah, who is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. We have Anat. I got the other one. There's a third one. And these are the Canaanite goddesses. But they all stem from Inanna. They're all worshipped pretty much in the same way. And Inanna was Ishtar, rather. Wait. No, it was Inanna. Wait, I'm trying to think. Tammuz is the equivalent of Ishtar. Yeah, Ishtar was still worshipped in Israel in the same way as Inanna was worshipped, because we have a particular text which talks about the women were crying over Tammuz. Let's do this whole genealogy so you have all of them down. What's in Torah? So Inanna is, who is the husband of Inanna? Remind me. No, oh, that's the first. Tammuz is the real husband, right? Gilgamesh is the bad boyfriend. Okay, Ishtar is Tammuz. By the way, the month of Tammuz is based on this guy, right? So Ishtar was married to Tammuz, same idea as Inanna and Dumuzi. You have the same notion of sacred marriage. You have the same notion. We didn't study this text, but both Dumuzi and Tammuz end up thrown into the nether world, right? They have to wander around in the nether world for 6 months, and then they're rebirthed when spring comes. And so there's the weeping over Tammuz, right? Because both Dumuzi and Tammuz were thrown by the goddess, punished and made to roam into the land of the dead for 6 months of the year. And so for 6 months of the year, Inanna is separated from Dumuzi, and then Dumuzi emerges after 6 months with the coming of springtime, right? And Tammuz is the same. So when you have in the biblical text, the women were on the side of the temple weeping over Tammuz, it's coming from there, right? They are doing this ritual of weeping when Tammuz has to go back to the land of the dead and then emerge after 6 months. And this story started with Inanna and Dumuzi. That's the original story of that. Yeah, exactly. Same idea. And there could have been, a sharing of information, right? Yes, definitely the pantheon of gods in Greece. I feel sometimes just copied the pantheon of gods over here, right? So that's so King Solomon was well versed in all of this stuff, basically. And then of course you have the Egyptian, and it's different there. The goddess is very different, Maat, which we will study at length next time. And she's a completely different story. It's not the same family of gods, right? Okay. Let's see. Good. So let me just remind you of the story of Inanna and Dumuzi, so you can write it down, so then you can understand, although it's not really important. It's fine. Just to say that it's always the same goddess that is reborn over the generations, and that if you know about Asherah, is the same type of goddess as Inanna and Ishtar, right? It's the descendant. Okay. Now, so yes, so the biblical text, who is of course written by the priestly caste, right? And preserved and protected by the priestly caste, doesn't like very much this idea of King Solomon roaming around, reading this literature and worshiping these goddesses, right? But here in this class, of course, because it's mother's house, I'm going to try to look at it a little differently. So I want to talk about that a little bit right now. So clearly he is well versed in the cultic literature. Clearly at one point they say he's worshiping those goddesses, right? He's well versed. We will see this when we do Song of Songs. We will see this when we do Proverbs and when we do Ecclesiastes, the references that are there that point to these goddesses, right? So there are clear references, which you will discover, especially in the book of Proverbs, very clear references to these goddesses. Why does he do that? So maybe we can talk about that a little bit. Why is it that this amazing king, intelligent, wise, godly, initially, I believe throughout, actually, right? Why is he going and studying those texts? Why is he borrowing from those texts as he is writing his own work? What do you think is his idea? What is he doing? It's unusual, right? Why is the first only biblical author to do this, to borrow from other traditions and bring it into his writing, use the same imagery and language to speak about Hebrew worldview, or he integrates it into the Hebrew worldview. Any ideas why he would do that? I like that. Yes, I like that. So of course, yes, we might imagine King Solomon trying to write not just for Jews, but for all the people he's in touch with, right? King Solomon had a reputation throughout the Middle East, including Africa, North Africa. So he is perhaps writing to a broader audience than just, the people of Jerusalem. And so he is borrowing these themes so that people can recognize and feel that they're in familiar territory and then learn from him, right? So I like that. It's like philosophers, like somebody like Maimonides. He was a devout Jew, but he wrote, he drew on Aristotle. He wrote in Aristotelian, philosophical language, so he could reach a broader audience, right? So, and most Jewish philosophers, quick plug, by the way, parentheses, I'm teaching a survey in Jewish philosophy next semester, from Book of Job to Emmanuel Levinas, 20th century. And I invite you all to take the class if you're interested. We will be doing, sorry to interrupt the whole lecture with this, but we'll be doing Job, Talmudic thought, Maimonides, Spinoza, Hasidic thought, Rosenzweig, Buber, and Levinas. That's the program. So it's all next semester, and it's called something Jewish Existentialism and Modern Philosophy or something like that, 252. And it'll be Tuesday, Thursday, 3 times. So if you haven't registered yet, you took the class, right? So please say a good word about it.
Very interesting.
It's always a great class, yeah. So you guys are totally welcome, and tell your friends. This is, if you want to finally get like survey course in Jewish philosophy, that's it. Like you will study all the main ones and you'll have that down forever. So, okay, back to, so, and when we study these philosophers, you will see they adopt the language of their contemporaries. They want to reach their contemporaries with a unique inspiration, right? Their inspiration is Hebraic. And all of these philosophers, the inspiration remains profoundly bound to the Jewish text, to the Jewish tradition, but they want to reach the Western audience with this inspiration. And so they speak the language of the audience. So someone like Emmanuel Levinas, post-Holocaust thinker, is read all over the world by everybody, but his thinking is profoundly Jewish. He's talking about whatever he's saying, you can trace it back to the Talmud and the biblical text. He's saying nothing else, but he's saying it in a language that people can listen to. People who hate the Bible, people who hate religious texts can be like, oh, that makes sense. I get it now, right? That's what exactly maybe Solomon is doing. People who are not religious, people who are secular, he wants to reach them with a unique inspiration, which in my view remains profoundly Jewish. King Solomon never loses his Judaism. He never loses his identity, right? He's always profoundly Jewish as he's writing, but he's speaking the language of his contemporaries. I like that. Thank you, Davidovich. Any other reason why he's borrowing from these traditions? Yes.
Literature in general is universal. It's not necessarily specific to one.
Yeah.
Subject or one religion or even in geographic.
Very good, right? It's the idea that wisdom can only be found together, right? He understands that I need to read those other texts to myself, enhance my wisdom, right? It's the idea of Plato, that wisdom can only be found in dialogue. Remember, how many of you have studied Plato? Right? All of you probably, almost, right? Plato believed this, right? It's only in the dialogue, right? In the in-between, as I said last time in the panel, right? That wisdom can emerge. And so King Solomon is aware of that. So he's creating these spaces of dialogue, this in-between where wisdom can emerge. So that is one of the reasons also, right? There's still another reason why he borrows. Beyond reaching the others, he's also doing something else by borrowing these motives from the foreign traditions. Something else he's doing that Maimonides was doing. So if you know what Maimonides was doing, why Maimonides is reading Aristotle, you'll know why Solomon is reading the cultic text of Inanna. Yes.
So is it to create like a polemic against certain ideologies he doesn't agree with?
In a way, because he's going to change the worldview, right? He borrows, but he then retells the story in a very Jewish way. So, but I don't know if it's polemic. It's something else is happening. When Maimonides is quoting Aristotle, what's he doing? It's not that he's fighting against the Greeks. He's fighting against the Muslims. He's not fighting against the Greeks. Why is he borrowing from Aristotle? What's his...
Like, is it also trying to show that Jewish thought and other thought can coexist?
Yes, that they can in fact say the same thing, perhaps that they have maybe a common core, but there's still another reason why Maimonides' draws is so intent that all should study Greek thought. Yeah.
Because he believes in the universality of truth. And so it's kind of like an appeal to authority, like, oh, this works in that tradition as well. So that's why
There's that, but there's more. There's more. Yes, try again.
Also, like to expand your mind.
There you go. You remember now.
Yeah.
You should have remembered too. Where were you? You did philosophy of religion, right? With me, yes. Suresh too. Suresh is sleeping with his eyes wide open. How do you do that? Okay. All right. Yes, this is something we don't know usually, but Maimonides believed that someone who just reads the Bible cannot understand the Bible. He believed one has to refine one's mind, expand one's worldview. And then we come back to the biblical text with a broad, intelligent, perceptive mind, and you can see things in the text that have laid dormant for centuries. You can see some of the deeper depths of the text that other non-philosophers don't see, right? So I think that is what Solomon is doing. He believes that by studying these other literature, he's going to be able to discover within the Jewish tradition some deeper truths that cannot be found through just patriarchal lens. Remember, the culture is patriarchal, right? And you can see only so much of God in a patriarchal lens, right? So he's going into this other literature in order to broaden his mind and in order to then come back to the Jewish tradition and discover there the divine feminine or the feminine face of God. That is what I think he's doing, right? The patriarchal culture has made God firmly masculine, and that's fine, right? This is also one of the attributes of God, right? The man of war, right? The protector and so forth. But because the culture is so overwhelmingly patriarchal, we have missed the other face of God, right? And King Solomon almost has to go and see that face elsewhere, right? Study these texts of the goddess, even worship at some point to come back and be like, here is a new vision of God that is already that has always been with us, but we have never seen it up until now. Do you follow what I'm saying? So he's able to see now within the Jewish tradition things that you cannot see if you just have the patriarchal lens, right? He has broadened his lens to include the feminine. And now he will give us a radically new vision of God, but which is not foreign to the text. It's not foreign to the Hebrew tradition. It's there. It's always been there. Follow me? Everybody with me? Davidovich? Yes? Okay, good. All right. So that's, I think, what he's doing, right? And that's what we're going to discover. So it's interesting. In the book of Proverbs, when we study it next time, we will see the goddess Mat very, very powerfully present there in the text. But at the same time, we will see the face of the God of Israel. He merges the two and comes out a radically new vision of who God is and what our connection to God should be. So it's very, very interesting. And I look forward to doing that work with you next time. Okay. Any questions so far, or comments, or contestations or troubles?
If he truly is a man of wisdom, then shouldn't he be looking for other wisdom in other places anyways? Isn't that the standard of what
Yeah.
people would call wisdom?
Yes, exactly. Right. In general, wisdom believes we have to be in dialogue to find wisdom. It's horizontal, right? Revelation is vertical. Wisdom is horizontal. It's found in connection, in dialogue. So he's obviously doing that. Yes, that works. Yes. Anything else? All right. So let's go into the mother's house attributes of the book of Proverbs. We'll go through our 5 points, and then I want to talk about something very interesting. I want to zoom in on one of the key concepts of Proverbs, which is the ability to listen. And then we'll be done. Okay, so immediately when you read Proverbs, you don't see mother's house right away, right? Anybody know why? What's the most obvious in the book of Proverbs? That's very father's housey. Go ahead.
Part of it is like addressing the father addressing the son.
Exactly.
And instructing the son.
Right.
And there's a lot of it there's a very negative view of women.
There is a few, yes, there's like, don't go with that. So there's 3 things, right? Father is instructing a son. So right away you're in that context, right? Kind of a patriarchal context of the father transmitting his knowledge to his firstborn, right? You have also a lot on the woman that leads you astray. So you do have this criticism of the kind of the foreign woman, who that the son must avoid by all means, right? You have also a very vertical view still in a way of wisdom when he says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This is not horizontal, right? So we have here this notion that wisdom is revealed, which is unusual. So one of the quotes that comes up over and over again in the text is the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And we're going to study this text a little bit at the end of today. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom seems very vertical, right? Doesn't seem very horizontal. And if you look in the book of Ecclesiastes, what's the definition of the fear of the Lord? Anybody know? Ecclesiastes 12. Only one person has the book.
Following under his law.
Exactly. Fear God and keep its commandments. They're identified in the book of Ecclesiastes. Right? So So now we are in the context of actions, not even the, receptivity that we usually see in the mother's house. Fear God means do the commandments. Boom, end of story. Okay, so that's the first layer. Seems very father's house, right? But when you scratch a little, you see completely new things. So let's go to the first one, masculine versus feminine, which is our first main distinction. Okay. So yeah, father teaching a son, but when you go a little further in the text, what is the gender of wisdom? When wisdom presents, it's female, right? So you go to Proverbs chapter 3, Proverbs chapter 8, you have a wisdom kind of personified as a woman, right? And this is unusual. And besides, wisdom, chokhmah in the Hebrew is feminine, right? It is a feminine noun. So wisdom is personified as a woman. And so that's one thing, right? And we're going to see, by the way, that she is personified actually as a goddess. She borrows a lot of the traits of the goddess Ma'at. So it's not just a woman, she is really straight up personified as a goddess, and then and so that's the first thing. Now the second thing is there's going to be in the book of Proverbs an identification between the goddess wisdom and the wife, the spouse. They are identified in the book of Proverbs. They have similar traits. They're described in similar terms, and we're going to see that. So in other words, what does this tell you? That the spouse or the wife in the book of Proverbs resembles the goddess wisdom. What's the author trying to tell us? You can't talk. You heard me on this before already. Lipstein.
They're the same thing.
That they're the same thing, right? The wife might be the embodiment of the goddess wisdom, right? So we're going to talk about that, of course, next time. So, and you have a very long passage dedicated to the wife, right? In Proverbs 31, which is, by the way, not written by Solomon, but written by a Canaanite sage, right? So this is another instance of King Solomon borrowing from the neighboring traditions, right? He definitely borrows from Egyptian tradition, but he also borrows from Canaanite tradition, as we see here in Proverb 31. It is a proverb by, I forgot the name. Anybody remember? Some king. It's one of the kings.
Lemuel.
Lemuel, yeah. So Lemuel is a Canaanite king, it's not a Jewish king. So I know I ruined the Friday night ceremony now of blessing your wife in Proverbs 31, which is now actually not from Solomon, but from a Canaanite author, right? So unbelievable borrowing, right? From these surrounding nations, which normally are deemed, by God corrupt, right? Notice the subversion here, right? These are the Canaanites, the Egyptians. These are the enemies of Israel, right? And yet here they are, right? Participating in the canonic literature. They're part of the voices that are considered revelation, right? So very interesting idea here, right? Okay, so that's the first thing we have here, right? This notion of the very strong presence of the goddess wisdom as a female, and also the spouse. And also, this is one of the interesting books which talks about not only the father's teaching, but the mother's teaching, right? Several passages you have, my son, listen to your father's teaching and do not forget your mother's instruction, right? So both here are, by the way, in the book of Deuteronomy, when you have the giving of the 10 Commandments, you also have the father and the mother side by side, right? Honor your father and your mother, right? This is very so there. These are the two main passages in the Hebrew Bible where they're side by side, right? One is when you follow the commandment to honor, and the second one is when you seek for wisdom. So the mother also has a strong place in the book of Proverbs. Okay, so a lot of women are populating the book of Proverbs. Any questions before we go to vertical horizontal? Epson, is that a question?
Yeah, it's between the first chapter of Proverbs, it says, do not forget your mother's wisdom. As he goes,
Oh, okay.
which would seem to imply that the mother spoke to him first.
Oh yeah, give me that.
Would
Oh,
seem
I don't
to
have it.
be more important.
Can you go there, please?
Like,
This is which chapter? Very interesting.
this is
Thank
the
you.
first chapter.
Okay.
He said, my son, heed the discipline of your father and do not forsake the instruction of your mother.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the discipline is the
The
father.
father's talking to him now,
Mm-hmm.
which we'd assume he's about to guide his son in whatever discipline or, right, this is way more of the father's house, as you would say, way of discipline, where he's going to go through a whole bunch of things. But he said, but do not forsake the instruction of your mother while we're doing this, which would seem to imply that the mother has already set up the base for the father to build on. Whatever.
Very nice. Do you have the Hebrew words for both? Curious. Do you have the
Musa
interlinear?
is what the father is giving.
Which one?
I'm sorry.
Musa, okay. And the mother?
Taras.
What?
Taras.
Ta'as?
Taras.
Toras? Torah?
Torah.
Like Torah?
Yeah.
Oh, you have the Ashkenazi Toras. There's no S normally in the text. Torah.
Taras.
Sorry.
Can't help it.
It's true, no? Confusing. Okay. Torah, interesting. It's the Torah of your mother. That's nice. Okay, interesting. I mean, it does say wisdom though, right? Is there another passage where it talks about the wisdom, chokhmah of the mother? That would be nice. I would like that to happen. If you find it, let me know. Okay, very nice. Yes, so you're right. In a sense, so Musa has to do more with action. Is that it, or behavior? What is exactly Musa?
To do with this, you're
Like, what do you mean by discipline?
Well, like, do these things.
Oh,
These things.
nice. Okay, so behavior, right? And Torah is more than knowledge.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay,
Keep in mind these things.
nice. Thank you. Nice, Epstein. Okay, very nice. Thank you. That helps. Good. Anything else before we go vertical, horizontal? Okay. So next one, vertical, horizontal. So yes, we have this repeating passage. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, in which implying a kind of, and then the commandments, right? In Ecclesiastes, fear God and keep the commandments. So it seems like initially the juro, right? Wisdom is found through keeping the commandments and obeying God, the reading the, being familiar with the law of Moses and so forth. But when you scratch a little, you do see that the wisdom in a way is transmitted horizontally in this text. It's the mother and the father who are, right? It's not the priest or Moses or a sacred text, right? That is guiding the son. It's the father and the mother. So it's interesting, by the way, the word Shema, listen, let me write it down. It's a very important keyword in the book of Proverbs, which will come back. Shema, which means listen. Normally, who are we listening to? Who is the Shema ascribed to in the books of Moses? Who should we Shema listen to normally in the 5 books of Moses? Who is the person that Shema is ascribed to? God, right? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, blah, 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 Adonai Echad, right? Shema, Deuteronomy, check, Deuteronomy 6, where's my reference? Deuteronomy 6:4, right? This is the Shema Yisrael. This is when it's something we recite, we recite this. Every time you're in the synagogue, you're reciting Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. God is one, our God is one, right? And then it goes on into love your God and so forth. So normally when you see Shema, you think immediately of God, that I am supposed to be, receptive to God, submissive to God, listening and following and obeying God, right? Now all of a sudden you see Shema ascribed to the father and the mother. Paf, complete transfer, right? Move from vertical, horizontal. Right? And so very important, if you know the 5 books of Moses and you come to the books of Proverbs, you're shocked, right? Because all of a sudden the Shema, which is ascribed only to God, is repeated over and over again. Now you ought to listen to your father and your mother in the same way that you have been listening to God, right? Okay, so really a big shift to the horizontal. Any questions on this one or comments or additions? Yeah.
Conversational people who use Shema as a verb is, it's not just reserved for biblical people. But I also thinking of the idea of living in the fear of the Lord. There's sort of like that addition to say, this is a Jewish text. Don't forget, this is a Jewish text, even though you're incorporating general wisdom.
Right, very good.
You shouldn't forget that part.
And we have to figure out also what it
And that's
really
why-
means.
And how does it get,
Mm.
otherwise, why would you even put it in the canon?
Yeah, that's true. Maybe some people think, oh, someone added that to make it more kosher. You know, but I don't think so. Yeah, that's a bad methodology. Yeah. Yeah, very good. Very nice. Absolutely. Right. So, and we're going to look at this text. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom in a bit to see what are some other ways to understand it. Okay. Next thing, law versus wisdom. So same thing. This is the same variation of what I just said. Yes, fear God and keep my commandments seems like we are in the context of the law, but when it's the father and the mother who are actually doing the teaching, why them? Anybody know why he picked the father and the mother and not the brother or the sister, or maybe the younger sibling? How about that? Well, why? Why are they so much better at this than maybe the younger sibling?
The parents aren't supposed to be teaching.
Yes, but why are they considered better than you, for example? What do they have that you don't have? There you go. Okay, very good. So now experience is what gives us wisdom, not some kind of divine law or decree, right? So it looks like the parents are picked here because precisely, not because they're better versed in the law than the children, although that might be true. Otherwise, we would have picked the priest, right? The priest should be teaching if it's going to be, or the Levites, right? If it's going to be about the law. But if it's the parents, it's really about experience. So what we see is that the juro, it's fear God and keep the commandments, but de facto, in fact, the wisdom is really stemming from their experience, from living life, from making mistakes, from stumbling around, from, great disappointments and great joys and what they learned from it. So here we have, again, this notion of wisdom as experience, right? And this on the horizontal level that we can see. So the book of Proverbs, even though it talks about God is kind of like almost an accessory, because who's doing the real teaching is the father and the mother based on their experience. So it's almost like ornamental. I'm going to show that it's not, but it seems a bit ornamental just to, kind of, it's like a decorative, right? Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but then ultimately is the father and the mother based on their experience, not in their fear of the Lord, who are teaching the son what to do. But we'll come back to that. Okay, separation versus integration. So yes, you do have a strong negative advice on going with this woman, the adulteress, who is also depicted as kind of in the margins of society, right? She's not mainstream, she's on the margins. She corresponds to the foreign woman, right? The one who's not in, she's out. So there's strong warning against going with this woman who is kind of in this liminal state, or she's kind of on the margins of society. So yes, you do have that separation, right? Be careful, stay with us, don't go there. By the way, that woman in Proverbs, we're going to find her again in the later works of Solomon. Anyone knows where? This woman who is shunned by society, who is on the margins of society. Song of Songs, main character. Okay, don't you love it? I love this guy. The first person I want to meet in the afterlife, King Solomon. He just took that woman and made her central character in the Song of Songs. One of the embodiments of the divine feminine, actually, we'll see. So very interesting, right? Development here of the foreign woman in the works of Solomon. Having said that, we just said this, right? Book of Proverbs borrows a lot of connections with outside traditions. So you do have a movement away from separation into integration and I mentioned just a few. We have Canaanite wisdom, we have Egyptian wisdom, and even one of the passages alludes to Sumerian wisdom when it talks about wisdom as a tree of life. We won't cover it because we're focusing on Ma'at, right? The Egyptian goddess, but the tree of life, who's the tree in the Canaanite religion? Yeah. Who's represented as a tree in the Canaanite religion? Who's the deity behind the tree symbolism? And you would have poles, big poles that were symbolic of the tree that the Hebrews would set up. Even in the temple, they had a big one right next to the ark. So, That was like the last straw for God. What was this pole doing here next to my ark? And the pole represented a tree. Who is the
I mean, I know there were Asherah trees. So
Asherah is
deity
the god.
Asherah of,
Exactly, right? Asherah is the goddess represented as a tree, right? And Inanna is connected to the tree. We know that. Ishtar is connected to the tree. All of them are represented by the tree of life, which symbolizes fertility, which symbolizes life, right? So, and eternity sometimes too. So when you have a tree, it's immediately, if you're in that context, you think of Asherah, you think of Inanna, and here saying, how is the text? She's a, right, is talking about wisdom and saying this wisdom is a tree of life. And what is Proverbs 3:17? Somebody who has a text. I'm gonna look at it.
Actually, they-
I think it's 3:17. 3:16. 16, I think.
The tree of life is shade to those who grasp her and those who once her are to
Exactly, right? So she's a tree. So talking about, so just before it says, yeah, it's talking about wisdom the whole time. And it talks here, she's a tree of life to those who take a hold of her. This is a intimate language, right? And those who hold her fast will be blessed. You have here language, bedroom language, right? To talk about this wisdom. This is exactly alluding. It's the only time I'll talk about it because then I focus on Ma'at. But here you have a moment where you have this notion when you embrace the goddess of wisdom, right? Like you would embrace the goddess Asherah or Inanna, you will have a long life and you will be blessed, right? So here we have very strong allusion here to Canaanite wisdom. But in the class, we will focus on Ma'at because she's much more prevalent in the works of Solomon. But just to give you an idea, right? So we have this borrowing, right? And we talked about why, right? King Solomon believes, right? Wisdom is something that we find together. Wisdom emerges from the in-between. I need to borrow from these traditions to fine-tune my own perception of the divine, right? So write down these points, right? And why does he borrow? Number one, he borrows because he believes he wants to reach everyone. Number two, he borrows because he believes that wisdom is found together. And number three, he borrows because he believes it can refine his own perception of Judaism or of the Hebrew text, right? You got these 3 points, all of you? It's very important. Yeah, okay. So that's kind of what's happening. So definitely we have integration versus separation, right? Okay, any questions on that before we continue? Mhm. Okay, last one. This is the one I want to focus on a little longer. Doing versus receiving. And here I want to focus on the notion of listen, shma, right? Which is the key word. Over and over again, listen, 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 listen. So we talked about this, I think, earlier. Anybody remember what is the seat of wisdom in the ancient Near East? What organ is the seat of wisdom according to the ancient Near Eastern? The ears. So it's not the brain, it's not the heart, it's the ears. That's what, if you're intelligent, you can hear. I like that definition. I'll tell you why. For me, and I agree with them, right? It is a sign of intelligence when a person is able to see the other side. That is a sign of intelligence, right? A person who can only see their side and cannot see the other side of things, cannot see how others perceive this particular thing is in a way not able to listen, right? So this is why philosophy develops the intelligence. Anybody knows why studying philosophy develops the intelligence? When you study philosophy, well, what are you doing? What do you have to learn to do? We don't do it so much here in America, but it's one of the skills of philosophy.
Understand the counterpoint of view.
Exactly. You should be able to argue your point and the opposite point. That's the skill. I can argue this, but I can also argue that, right? And then I have to, so the ability to argue your point and to argue someone else's point, that's shma, right? You're able to see their point. Boom, you're intelligent now, right? That's the definite intelligence is not your quick thinker or your good debater, right? I think we talked about this in the panel, right? It's not about being a good debater or a quick thinker. It's about how capable are you of in a way hearing and understanding the opposite viewpoint, right? How able, and then once you understand it, you can respond, right? It's not about you overcoming the other viewpoint. It's about you being like, I get that. That makes sense. Now you're broadened, right? The problem with debate, I think Professor Maligan was saying that, is that you're fighting. So you're not learning. So you're not moving towards truth, because the movement towards truth in Platonic literature is a conversation. Together, we're listening to each other and moving. So that's the idea, right? So in the Greek thought is very similar. As I converse and listen and I'm learning from you and we're moving together, boom, that is a sign of intelligence. If you want to be intelligent, you should be capable. Two things: argue the opposite point and learn from any fool you encounter. So that's the two signs of intelligence. You can learn from any fool that you encounter, and you can argue a view that is opposite to your own. If you're capable of doing that, you're good. Your ears are well developed. Okay, so where was I? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the Shema. Okay, but now I want to hone in a little bit on the fear of the Lord, because I think there is a connection between fearing God and this type of intelligence. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So there's two ways to understand the fear of God. There's a kind of literal way, simple way, the pshat way, and then you have a more deeper philosophical way, I think, to understand the fear of God. First obvious way, fear God and keep his commandments, what the book of Ecclesiastes concludes with. So first thing, right, when you fear God, that means, okay, I obey God. I follow in God. What God tells me to do, I do. It's written, it's clear. I follow. I fear God, right? The very Father's house definition of the fear of God. But then you have another way to think about it, and I want to invite you to look at that. Who has a Bible here? Anybody has a text? I don't. Have to use it. Oh, good. Okay, Suresh, help us out. You will look up. So now I want to go deeper, right? I want to look into a more mother's house definition of fear of God, which is leitmotif in the book of Proverbs. Please look up Suresh, Isaiah 50, verses 10 to 11. Do you know where Isaiah is? I have the table of contents. Okay.
Isaiah, what was it? The verse number?
50, chapter 50, verses 10 to 11. And then you can read to us. And we're going to analyze this passage and discover a different way of thinking of the fear of God, which I think is the way Solomon is thinking about it.
Okay.
Go ahead. So you read from 10 to 11. Go ahead.
Who is among you that feareth the Lord, that obeyeth the voice of his servant, that walketh in darkness and hath no light? Let him trust in the name of the Lord, and stay upon his God. Behold, all ye that kindle a fire, that compass yourselves about with sparks. Walk in the light of your fire, and in the sparks that ye have kindled. This shall ye have of mine hand. Ye shall lie down in sorrow.
Kind of King James version. It's very nice. Okay, let me read and highlight a few things. Okay, who among you fears the Lord? Okay, so now we're about to see. He's going to talk about what is the fear of God, right? So first thing we have, who among you fears the Lord and obeys? Connection between fear and obedience. Very important. We'll talk about that. Then he continues. Let the one who walks in the dark and has no light trust in the name of the Lord. So now we have the word trust. Okay, so fear, two words, trust and obey. Okay, good. And then it says, but now all you who light fires and provide yourselves with flaming torches. So we'll come back to this notion of trust and obey in a second. But first I want to look at this. I want to look at this notion of light. Who among you fears the Lord? Let the one who walks in the dark and has no light trust in the name of the Lord. So basically, the prerequisite of the fear of God is that you're walking in darkness and have no light. What does this mean? So right? It is only the one who walks in darkness and has no light who can trust in the name of the Lord. So what is he saying here about the fear of God or the trust? What is a prerequisite for genuinely fearing God based on this passage? Yeah.
Because I think he's saying when people have good things going for them and life is good, it's easy to just like forget about God and not be afraid and think like, I'm on top of the world right now. I have nothing to fear.
I like
And
that.
once you're like kind of, you've hit rock bottom, the only person or the only thing you can turn to is God.
Oh, I hadn't seen that at all. I like it. It's better than what I was gonna say. Okay, yes. Yes, you can't fear God until you've hit rock bottom. You don't need, you're right, you're in control, right? There's no trust. You trust yourself, right? There's no transcendence in such a life, right? Nice. Anybody else see it differently, a little more epistemologically? You walk in the dark. Think Socrates. You walk in the dark, you have no light. Now you can fear God. Yes.
It's like a blind, it's blind obedience
Oh, yeah, I'm saying all kinds of things.
without having, um, any examination. That you're just doing it because you told this is what you
Okay.
have to do.
Oh, that's nice too. I like that. You can write that down too. Right? There's a notion of complete surrender, right? You're not like calculating, there's no calculation or hesitancy. There's no light. You walking blindly. Okay, I still had something else in mind that no one is, yes.
I think it's complete dependence
Okay.
on God, because if there is no light and you are in the dark, you have no idea where you're going. You
Mm-hmm.
can only walk in the dark if you fully trust in God and have your faith depending on God. That's when you can move in complete darkness.
Okay, got it, got it. Still not seeing the Socrates one. Yes.
Maybe the view is that fear doesn't necessarily have a negative connotation, and that fear could just mean to affirm the existence of or be aware of the existence of.
For
So-
sure. Oh yeah, definitely doesn't have the negative connotation of I'm afraid, right? It's a more like a respect, right? We see that the translation trust and obey, right? It will be the translation of fear of God. Think, what did Socrates say is the beginning of wisdom?
I think like maybe the point you're getting at is that the only way to fear God is to realize that you know nothing.
Exactly, right? Socrates, I know that I don't know. I walk in the dark. I have no light. Now I'm ready, right? For higher knowledge, right? This is kind of very similar to the Socratic view that I know that I don't know, and that is the beginning of wisdom. So we have this notion here, first of all, right? You can't really fear God until you've hit this kind of rock bottom existentially and also in your knowledge, in your quest for truth. You don't know. You don't know where you are. You don't know what to believe. You're confused. Now you're ready for the fear of God, right? Now, when we're confused and when we're seeking guidance, there's a very natural reaction, which is which occurs here in the rest of the passage. But now, all you who light fires and provide yourselves with flaming torches, go walk in the light of your fires. This is what you will receive from my hand. You will lie down in torment. So what's the temptation when you're confused? You're stuck at rock bottom. You don't know what to do next. What is the temptation based on this text? Instead of fearing God, what do we end up doing? What does it mean to light a fire, or to provide myself with a flaming torch? Yeah,
No oneself over God.
exactly. I'm gonna come up with a solution to this problem. I'm gonna do this way, right? And of course, the result is torment, right? Based on the text. Okay, so now we have we're continuing our excavation, what it means to fear. So now you have this notion of trust, which I want to go deeper in, right? Look at this text from the Proverbs, very famous text, which is a definition, I think, of the fear of God within the Proverbs this time. And it's this one, Proverbs 3, verses 5 to 6. Some of you have it memorized, right? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways and he will make straight your paths, right? So you trust, meaning you don't lean on your own understanding. You don't have a flaming torch, right? You don't have your own fire. And then you acknowledge God in all your ways, and then God will make straight your paths. Now, so I want to stop a little bit. Okay, fear of the Lord then is trust. Trust in the sense that you do what God tells you to do. You do not do what you tell yourself to do. You see the difference, right? In other words, instead of listening to your own voice, trust seems to mean I listen to God's voice, right? Yes.
Can you say that last quote again about leaning on your own? Don't.
Yes, acknowledge him in all your ways and he will make straight your paths. Oh, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways and he will make straight your paths. It seems to be the definition of fear of God, which we don't know what the hell that is, right? But now it's a little clearer. Fear of God is to trust, to not lean on my own understanding, to acknowledge God in all my ways, and to receive guidance for my path, right? Okay.
That's-
Proverbs 3:5-6. Okay, so that, are you following how that could be one of the definitions of the fear of God? I just did a big detour, right? I went to Isaiah where it's very clear that fear equals trust. And now I go back to Proverbs where you have the word trust. Are you followed by reasoning? Okay, I'm trying to figure out a better way to say fear of God, which means nothing. Okay, so here's my question now. If fearing God, and by the way, see the connection with Shema, right? I trust God. I don't lean on my own understanding. I present my dilemma to God, and God makes straight my paths, meaning God in a way gives me the guidance that I'm looking for, right? I present which way should I go, and then God gives me this guidance, right? So you see how there is an element here of listening, right? To fear God means I don't listen to my voice, I listen to God's voice. I don't rely on myself, I rely on God, right? For guidance. So of course, the $1,000,000 question is, okay, if the fear of God means to listen to God and to follow God's will, how do I hear his voice? That's the $1,000,000 question. Because, I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes you have dilemmas where you don't find the immediate answer in the biblical text. Or anybody like that? Like you have dilemmas in your life and there's like no law that prescribes you what to do on that dilemma. Anybody with me? Yes, you, anybody else? Yes, so now what? Right? So there seems to be here something more than just keep the commandments, because here you're talking about my path, right? My decision making, which sometimes there's no answer in the text. And I need to learn to listen so I know what to do. So how do we hear the voice of God, right? That's the question for me. Because clearly there are limits to what the commandments can give me. I mean, there are 10 commandments, there's 613, associated commandments, but in my situation, none of them works, right? So now what do I do? How do I fear God in this situation? How do I, in a way, trust? How do I acknowledge? How do I receive the guidance? Are you following me? Anybody figure out this problem yet? Are you seeing the problem?
Yeah.
That there will be times where you want to fear God. It's like you want to acknowledge, but how does it work? How do you do it? And a lot of us come, we're like, have you wonder what to do. You ask people, you look in the text, and still you don't have an answer, right? I've had this a lot. And then you try to over reason. This is me walking around the track 5 times, trying to figure out the problem, right? This is how I used to be, right? I would go and just talk through the problem. It could be this, but then I could do this, but what if I do this? And in the end, do you know if I got an answer at the end? Never. And so, I would randomly pick anyone and just go with it. So this is very difficult, right? And Solomon, remember, is talking about wisdom. Part of wisdom is the ability to hear. If I can hear God, I mean, we are all willing to hear God, but the problem is how, right? I have a dilemma. How do I know what God really wants me to do? The biblical text is not enough. People don't understand my situation. How do I then develop my hearing? This is, I think, Solomon's question here, Solomon's problem. So let's talk about that a little bit in the time that remains. How might we, based on a little bit on what we've been reading, how do we develop this kind of what Maimonides called prophetic gift, right? The ability to hear God, not just understand rationally the text, but to gain deeper insight through direct contact. Remember, Maimonides was, I want to talk about him a little bit, but he was both a rationalist and a mystic. We often don't know the mystical side of Maimonides, we know the rationalist side, but Maimonides was, on the one hand, very rational, explaining the text, being philosophical about the text, but at the same time, he had moments where he would intuitively connect to God and in a way regain prophetic insight, which he called the gift of prophecy, right? This is what Solomon is talking about, right? Yes, we can consult the text, we can talk to people, but is there not a way also to directly hear the voice of God, right? Or to directly receive an answer and to directly receive guidance? Are you following? Has anybody ever longed for that? Like direct guidance, like, no, you're good. Good. The texts are enough for now. You don't need guidance. How do you go through life? I'm curious. It's an honest question.
I don't really look like
How do you know like what to do? Like,
Think about
okay, so you're with the flaming torches and be careful. Anybody else think about it? Or have some of you noticed the limits of your thinking about it?
I'd say, don't overthink it.
Okay, so you're like, you realize there's a
Say,
limit.
don't overthink it. There are limitations. And sometimes you just have to wait for the passage of time.
Okay,
Just
okay.
for things to change.
All right, we're getting there. So,
That you can't acquire all of this like here now.
okay, I like that. Now we're heading somewhere.
That's something,
Mm.
it's gotta be for your experience. We're talking to others who have more experience.
Okay, so that's the
who
yes
Can.
and the
help you
waiting.
See which way to go.
All right, so
Okay,
we do have, we have resources, we have text, we have people, we have a little bit of the reasoning. But how many of you have found the limitation of the text, the people, and the reasoning? Has anybody got to that point of limitation of those three? Anybody? Am I the only one here who's struggling without any resources?
well, that's fair.
Okay, well, that's the one he's kind of
That's-
alluding
that's
to, right?
the other part.
So really, all of you find enough advice in the text and the people around you and in your own mind? There's never been.
beyond all these things, like, just don't worry about it.
No, that's nice. That's a good strategy.
Sometimes there's no explanation, and it's better not to seek an explanation.
Okay.
To drive yourself crazy.
Let me tell you when you'll start having dilemmas, okay? Because right now I see you do not have dilemma, and I will tell you why. It's when you come out of your community and start to see, how do I be myself here? How do I bring what I have there into here? And now you will have serious questions. I predict it. So right now you're safe. You're good. You can follow the script. The day you step out, let me give you this scenario. You're gonna die right now. You guys are snickering, but you're gonna die right now. Imagine the four of you. Let me just pick on you. Fall in love with a Christian.
With the poor who?
You fall in love with a Christian. You
Oh,
or you can fall in love with a Muslim. How about that? You fall in love with a Jew. What's the worst case scenario? Okay, so you're good. Someone your parents hate. Okay, you're good. You're blessed. Okay, are you seeing my scenario? Now what? Do you see how you talk to your rabbi? No. The scripture? No. Your intelligence just going in circles. You see what I'm saying? And you can't give this person up. Like, you're not going to give them up. They're your soulmate. Do you see now how there's a little bit of tension arising?
No.
Okay, tell me why.
Heard the answer, you're not interested in the answer.
What do you mean?
that's a good.
Oh, it says no.
That's a good.
Right, the text says no.
Oh.
The text gave you the answer. You don't like the answer, that's a separate.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So you're staying. Okay. All right. You guys are good with this?
Well,
Huh?
Charles on this one.
Yeah,
Y'all-
I would have to.
I cannot work with you. I cannot work with you. Clearly, you have never been in love with somebody who is not a Jew.
That's
Yes.
probably
I'm waiting
true.
around the, call me up when it happens.
So we're not fishing in that pond.
Okay, no, I love it. You're doing great. You're doing great. You're doing great. None of you are a little bit remotely tempted now. Y'all are very strong. Y'all are very anchored. Yeah, I see that. I see that. Okay. Well, listen, if it ever happens, hit me up, call me, and we'll talk. Right? But imagine though, let's imagine a good Jew like you or whoever else you are, whatever you guys are, all of a sudden, let's imagine the scenario. You fall deeply in love with your soulmate who happens to be on the other side. Listen, it happens. My parents are like that, right? Jew and Christian. So there was quite a bit of trouble with that. Happens. Now, you don't have the rabbi to rely on. They're going to say no. The text is clear. You're very clear on that. It's saying no. Your mind is all confused. Your heart, on the other hand, is 100% certain, right? When you get to that point, you need more. That's what I'm talking about. Maybe you will never get to that point, and that's fine. But when you do get, and some people do, what then, right? When you get to that point, you realize at one point, I cannot rely on text. I cannot rely on the rabbinic or the teachers, my parents. My mind is confused. Now you need to get the extra step, which is, what does God really want, right? Is God a Jew? There's the Desmond Tutu. Do you know Desmond Tutu? The bishop who was siding with Mandela, right? Side by side with Mandela to reconcile South Africa. He wrote a very interesting book entitled, God is Not a Christian. God is not reduced, right, to a text or to a tradition or to a community. At that moment, you realize, okay, now I have to turn to the Creator, right, and find some answers. This is what Solomon, who is in the same situation that I'm talking about, transgressing, his tradition is not enough anymore to guide him. He's married to an Egyptian princess. He's interested in other gods. He's not finding any answers in his own tradition. He has to go beyond that. And that's why the listening and this ability to connect directly to the Creator becomes important. Right now you don't need it, and maybe you will never need it, and you're very lucky if you never get to that point. But it is also a privilege to be able to connect in that way, right? So even though you don't need it right now, I will still give you some guidelines how to do it, just in case you are. Are you ready? Based on this text. So how to hear directly the voice of God. Workshop. Look, it is useful information. You know?
I might walk out if this constitutes heresy. I don't know. Tell me what.
Based on our text, entirely based. You will like this, don't worry. I trust, I think you will like it. All right, number one. And I mean, I hope you should be a little bit remotely interested in hearing directly the voice of God. No, it's not an interest. No, Davidovich, you really.
I'm not sure if I'm interested in hearing the voice you're hearing, because
Not me, not me. Don't put me there. No, I'm a vehicle. There's nothing of me coming here. This is just, I'm a vessel for these texts. Pure vessel. Okay. Well, listen and you will hear maybe something. Okay, number one, what I'm getting from this text about hearing directly, which I think is possible here, although it takes practice, it's not just any idiot who can do it. Number one, to be able to hear clearly, right? You have to understand the limits of your own reasoning. That one is for Davidovich. You have to, okay, this is what the text is saying, right? All of you who light fires and have flaming torches, right? If you are still relying on your own reasoning, chances you're blocking in a way, you're in a way blocking yourself from hearing something else. Are we good so far, Davidov? Am I kosher?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
But the torch is, what if you just leave the torch behind and just walk?
What do you mean?
What if you just leave the torch behind and just walk into the dark?
Yes, now you're in a better place because you're in the dark, and now you're going to have to rely on something else than your torch. You see what I'm saying? Who said that? In your light, we see light. Where is this text? Is this in the New Testament or the Old Testament? I don't even know. I think it's, who said that? Google it. In your light, we see light. It's Psalms, no? Okay, let me see, because that would help me. Let me type it up. In your light, St. Augustine quotes it, but
Why does that sound like a clan chant? What is the Ku Klux
Eh,
Klan when they
Psalm
light the
36.
cross on fire? They're like, by this-
why are you going there right now?
That's
Psalm
where my
36. Psalm 36. In your light, we see light. Okay, so there's a light of your torch, and there's a divine light, basically. So what I'm talking about is connecting to the divine light. So first thing, are we good? You in a way, you don't rely on your own torch. You don't rely on your own understanding, which I'm really following the text, right? Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. It's a prerequisite, right? Are we good so far? For sure? Okay. Number two. Second thing, which I think is the block, because many people want to hear the voice of God, but they're not ready to obey it. This is for you, Epstein, in a good way. I'm with you on that one. The fact is, if you're not ready to obey, you're not ready to hear. In other words, if you're not ready to go in any direction that you feel is the direction God is telling you to go on, right? If you're not ready to go either this way or that way, I'm open, I'm detached, I'm ready, I'm willing. If you're not in that state of consciousness, you're not ready, you're not going to hear anything. Kosher? Because remember, trust and obey is the two, right? In that book of Isaiah, to fear means to obey or to trust, right? So I'm still basing myself on the passage. The second prerequisite, which by the way is the main obstacle, because most of us, we want to hear the voice of God, but we wanted to say that, this, right? We're not ready for the possibility that God will be like, that, like what you were saying, you're in love, right? Let's imagine this unimaginable situation that you're in love with a Christian woman, right? And right, and now deeply you want God to say yes, and you're not ready. Well, in your case, maybe I can flip it. How about that? You think God should say no. Well, no, I'll leave it in the hard part. You really love her, you want to be with her, you want God to say yes, and you're not willing that he would say no. So that in that state, you're not ready to hear. You should be willing to whatever you hear. If it says yes, yes. If it says no, no. Right? It's kind of what I think you are in that state because you're already reasoning in that state. So I think you are ready actually to hear the voice of God, right? Yes.
But if, like, calling out to God, waiting for an answer, but you're like, oh, I don't want it to be this answer. So you figure out which answer you really want it to be.
No, see, no, you can't. You're doing a torch right now. You're lighting
No,
a torch.
But if you, it's like flipping a coin and hoping that it doesn't land on
Ah.
one option, to then do the other option that you want more.
This is all the torches. I mean, I'm not saying torches are bad. Torches are very useful in the night, right? But he's talking here about there are moments where you won't have a torch. That's what I'm talking about, right? Moments where your torches are not helping you. For now, they're helping you, so stay with it. It's fine. Torches are great. Light your torches, right? But there will be moments in life where your torch will die out, right? I'm talking about these liminal situations. So that moment, you have to rely on the divine light in that sense. It's okay. Right now, you're not there. One day you will be. You will remember. Maybe. Okay. Are we good with that? So Epstein, you're good, right? You have to be willing to obey before, and this is the main obstacle. The last one is patience, meaning you stay open, receptive. I think that's what she was saying. Bedel was saying about you wait until the answer presents itself. You don't rush into one or the other direction. You wait until you receive some kind of strong conviction or strong sign that that is the path you should take, right? So this is just a small workshop, just in case, right? You find yourself outside in the dark, right? Which hopefully you won't, because it's easier to be inside with the torches, right? But one day, if you find yourself outside in the dark, this is one path which I have found to be reliable, right? And by the way, the voice of God is easily recognizable. If it's the voice of condemnation and criticism and hatred, it's not the voice of God. The voice of God, when you hear it, you will always feel full of love and excited about the answer. It might hurt, but you will feel it's always an answer which will feel loving, right? It might hurt to not, right? Like Epstein, who is in love with the Gentile woman, it will hurt when God says, right? But you will feel that it is the most loving course of action. It will be an answer out of love, right? That is, I think, the sign that it's the divine voice speaking to you. So you guys are not yet in the prophetic gift level, but one day, but you know, there will come times in this life. I really believe that everyone has what we call a dark night of the soul, where the torches just extinguish and where nothing is giving you the answer you need. At that moment, I want you to remember this workshop because it is a reliable way to be guided through this process. So you shut down your reasoning, you acknowledge, I'm not going to figure it out. You're willing to obey, you're patient, and you recognize the voice by the fact that it is the most loving decision you will make. It is the most loving course of action. That you know for sure is God, right? If it's if you hear the voice and you're still anxious and you're still conflicted, it's not the voice. That's another sign also that I really like. Voice, God speaks, no partner, no other voices, pure monotheistic experience, right? I have so many voices by myself. God speaks, boom, there's no other voice. Everything shuts down. There's only one voice that resonates, and it is the voice of love. That is how you recognize it among the many voices floating in your head, right? Is this too mystical for you? Are you guys surviving this introduction? Are you okay? Surviving this introduction to mystical connection to God. Okay, good. All right. And this is Shema, right? This is teaching you how to Shema. For it says listen. So how do we listen? This is really the key, right? If you can understand this, you have found the key to the book of Proverbs. Oh, I'm over time. Okay, great. Thank you. We are done. So next time,